Jason Kenney.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Travis, I hope you noticed that Pastor Macon announced you as Jason Tays. So we now have 5 Jasons in cabinet. Respected members of the clergy of different traditions, elected officials, fellow Albertans, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Dan, for those kind words. And how about a round of applause for Dan and Michaela for restoring this wonderful but latent tradition of the prayer breakfast. I'm looking forward to hearing the real keynote speaker today, the Reverend Pat Nixon, who is not only one of my heroes as the founder of the Mustard Seed, but he's also the co-founder of 2 members of our caucus, Jason and Jeremy Nixon. I don't know how he did it all. The grocery bills alone must have been beyond that, the ability of a pastor, so I think it's proof that miracles are true. Miracles can happen. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at the Provincial Prayer Breakfast, which effectively revives the latent tradition of the old Premier's Prayer Breakfast. I'm not sure exactly, I was at this breakfast many years ago. I think it was around 1995, when my esteemed predecessor, the Honorable Ralph Klein, was Premier, and he showed up at the prayer breakfast, the Premier's prayer breakfast, a little bit late. He was supposed to be here, I guess, at about 7 a.m., but he rolled in close to 9, just as they were about to shut the thing down. And he was looking a little bit rumpled, a little worse for wear, a little bit of a stubble on his face, and but he got up to the front and he kind of rallied, and he said, "Well, folks, sorry to be late, but I decided I might as well stop by on my way home." And he then apparently, I seem to recall, he then launched into what we might call a slightly confused version of the Lord's Prayer. I miss Ralph, and may he rest in peace. But I want it to be noted that I was actually here before 7 a.m. Again, proof that miracles are possible. I'd like to commend the organizers and volunteers for restoring this tradition, to gather leaders from across our community to pause and to pray for our province and her people. In doing so, let me begin by quoting one of the greatest Canadians, I believe, in history, His late Excellency, the Right Honourable Georges Vanier, former Governor General of Canada. As he took the oath of office in 1959, Vanier said to Parliament, quotes, "My first words are a prayer. May Almighty God in His infinite wisdom and mercy bless the sacred mission which has been entrusted to me by Her Majesty the Queen, and help me to fulfill it in all humility. In exchange for His strength, I offer Him my weakness. May He give peace to this beloved land of ours, the grace of mutual understanding, respect, and love." Unquote. I hope those words inspire this renewed prayer breakfast tradition, that it may help to strengthen the virtues of servant leadership, of humility, mutual understanding, respect, and love. Now, when it was announced a few weeks ago that I was attending this event, the reaction in some corners of social media was not very sociable. By the way, if you don't believe in hell, just spend a few minutes on political Twitter, and that'll change your mind right quick. I know, without even looking, they're already angry at me on Twitter for having made that joke. But a common thread of that criticism was that this very event is supposedly indicative of some kind of a sinister agenda, and that it is a threat to the secular, diverse nature of our society. Much of that criticism seemed to be focused on this being a Christian event in particular. So let me respond to that by arguing that real pluralism, or what we often call multiculturalism, is not about the superficial trappings of diversity. Authentic pluralism requires that we truly respect the most deeply held beliefs of our fellow citizens, recognizing that for millions of our fellow Albertans, those beliefs are rooted in or are formed in part by particular religious traditions. Public opinion polls indicate that about 2/3 of Canadians and similarly 2/3 of Albertans believe in God or a higher power. 56% of Albertans recently surveyed by CROP said that, quotes, "My religious beliefs are very important to me." And a 2017 Angus Reid Institute survey indicates that 60% of Albertans pray, with 36% indicating that they do so fairly frequently. For what it's worth, these numbers on belief and observance are significantly higher for women than they are for men, and for new Canadians than they are for people born in this country. In other words, prayer and belief are deeply important to a majority of our fellow citizens, and they should not be made to feel unwelcome in the public square as a result. Now, to argue against myself, while those numbers are interesting, I think they're actually irrelevant. They don't really matter because religious freedom is non-negotiable, and rights are not dependent on how many people exercise them or how small a minority they might constitute. As former Liberal Cabinet Minister Clifford Lincoln once said, rights are rights are rights. The freedoms of conscience and religion are the first two fundamental rights enumerated in the Charter of Rights, and they are given similar prominence in virtually every major human rights instrument in the world. That is because they are understood to be freedoms through which we define who we are and our place in the world. Now, it is peculiar that those criticizing my participation in a Christian gathering such as this are generally silent when I participate in dozens of events organized by other faith communities every year. For 9 years, I had the high honor of serving as Canada's Minister for Multiculturalism, and for 5 of those years as Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. During that time, I made a special effort to encounter people across the full spectrum of Canada's diversity. And for me, that meant in part showing respect for the most deeply held, transcendent beliefs of different communities manifest in their traditions of religious faith. This has given me the deeply enriching experience of being able to honor, observe, and when appropriate, participate in a vast array of prayer traditions, including those of the Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, Baha'i, and other faiths, and within those faiths across the spectrum of denominations and practices. These experiences have taken me from, for example, a Kaddish or morning ceremony at the oldest synagogue in India, to Shabbos prayers at the Kotel, or the Western Wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. These experiences have taken me from attending Friday prayers and greeting Muslim friends marking important feasts like Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha in both the Sunni and Shiite mosques, from Fort McMurray to Lethbridge, and from Cairo to Damascus. They have taken me from observing millions gathered for one of the largest Hindu days of prayer in Mumbai to hosting Diwali pujas, both on Parliament Hill and here at our legislature. They've taken me from praying at the Harmandir Sahib, the Golden Temple of the Sikh faith in Amritsar, India, with my friend Tim Uppalji, to visiting dozens of Sikh Gurdwaras across Canada. And they've taken me to honoring the magnificent spectrum of Christian traditions of prayer and worship, from participating in the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom at the Ecumenical Patriarch at the Fener in Turkey, to praying the Rosary with Cree Kokums in Lac St. Paul in northern Alberta, to worshiping with 24 evangelical Christian converts from Iran in a Calgary school gymnasium, almost all of them refugees from religious persecution. One of them, Dr. Zilke, is here today. On a recent Sunday, for example, I started early in the morning praying with Chaldean Catholic refugees in the language that Jesus spoke, Aramaic. And then I went on to the Divine Liturgy with the Coptic Orthodox community from Egypt, praying in Coptic and Arabic. Then I went to, attended a spirit-filled service at a Afro-Caribbean Pentecostal church. And you might well imagine I was the stiffest guy in the room. And later in the day, visiting a Swaminaraya Mandir and a Nanak Sar Gurdwara. In fact, later this morning, I'll be hosting a celebration at the legislature of Guru Purab, the 550th anniversary of the birth of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, a central prophet of the Sikh tradition, and a central day for that monotheistic faith. So to my Sikh friends who are here, and I see a few, Guru Purab Diyan, Lak Lak Vadaya. And as is customary at that event, I will begin and end my speech with the following words in Punjabi, which are offered every time a Sikh speaks formally. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, which means the pure belong to God, victory belongs to God. Because of all of these experiences, I've been able to befriend spiritual leaders from around the world, from His Holiness Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, to His Holiness Pope Tawadros, who's of the Coptic Orthodox Church, whose installation I attended in Cairo under a massive security threat years ago, to His Holiness Misrar Mahmud, the Caliph of the Jamaat Ahmadiyya of the Muslim community, who himself lives under a constant security threat, to His Highness the Prince Karim the Aga Khan of the Ismaili Shiite community, to so many others from whom I have learned so much from across Canada and around the world. Now, I do not share these experiences to argue for some kind of syncretism that blurs the lines between different beliefs. Authentic pluralism means understanding and, crucially, accepting that there are, frankly, contradictory and exclusive truth claims at the heart of the world's great faiths. Authentic pluralists agree to live, though, in mutual respect and harmony, notwithstanding those basic creedal differences. It is not necessary to deny those differences, nor to diminish the largest faith community, which in Canada happens to be the Christian community, in order to sustain a healthy and harmonious pluralistic society. And so here is my point. This prayer gathering today is not a threat to pluralism. It is pluralism in action. It is every bit as much a legitimate and necessary expression of authentic pluralism as the Guru Purab event that I will host at the legislature later today. And I believe our country is living proof of the success of that pluralism. Many of the founders of our public education, welfare, and healthcare systems, for instance, were people of faith, especially nuns who gave their lives to the service of the poor and the sick. Canada's first hospital, l'Hôtel Dieu de Montréal, a été fondé en 1645 par Jean Mance, avec 3 sœurs les hospitalières de Saint-Joseph de la France. Two centuries later, members of the Grey Nuns Order from Montreal founded the hospital of the same name here at Edmonton. Our first schools in Alberta were likewise established by Catholic and Protestant missionaries like Father Albert Lacombe and Robert Rundle. Lacombe is perhaps even better remembered as a peacekeeper, not just in helping to broker Canada's treaties with the Indigenous peoples of Alberta, but also limiting conflict between First Nations. He even tried to intervene during one battle between the Blackfoot and the Cree, but as he stood between them waving a white flag, a ricochet bullet grazed his head and knocked him unconscious. Heroics like that, combined with the education, healthcare, and advocacy, created a bond between the Indigenous people of the prairies and many of the people of faith who served amongst them. You can see it to this day in the great annual pilgrimage by tens of thousands of mostly Indigenous people from across Western Canada to Lac Sainte Anne, which I'm proud to say I attended as the first premier to do so this summer. Now, the role of people of faith in our common life is not just part of our past, but also of our present and undoubtedly part of our future. Our pluralistic society grows richer by the day as newcomers from faith communities around the world choose Canada in part because of our religious freedom. They are not only building temples and synagogues, gurdwaras, mandars, and mosques, but they are also revitalizing churches. Whatever differences exist in their ways of worship are trivial compared to their unity and respect for the role of faith in their lives and in serving the common good. And also in sharing a common belief in the Golden Rule, common to all of the great faith traditions. In closing, let me turn to what has gathered us, which is the call to prayer. The great Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, once said that, quotes, "I used to pray that God would feed the hungry, or do this or do that. But now I pray that he will guide me to do whatever I'm supposed to do, what I can do. I used to believe that prayer changes things, but now I know that prayer changes us, and then we change things." She also said that, quotes, "The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. And the fruit of service is peace." Let us be inspired by those words and her example. And allow me to close with the words that we will use to open the legislature this afternoon. Words that have been opening our Mother Parliament at Westminster for 500 years in a continuous tradition of prayer at the heart of our Westminster parliamentary tradition. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our Queen and her government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interests and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Thank you, and God bless Alberta.
In the prayer for the Premier, I chose the Psalms